Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for joining us today for this conversation. I'm Paul Saunders, President in the Center for the National Interest and publisher of the National Interest. And we're really excited today to have a great panel with a group of really impressive authors, each of whom wrote for a recent online symposium that we did at the National Interest on energy dominance, President Trump's policy of energy dominance. What is it, and how do we get it? So we're really pleased to have the group here with us today. We will ask each individual to talk for about 5 or 6 minutes. Then we'll open it up for questions from our participants. And when we get to that point, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So we're going to start first with Diana Furchtgott-Roth of the Heritage Foundation. Diana has has had a very distinguished career in government in the United States, in the Transportation Department, the Treasury Department, the chief economist at the Labor Department, chief of staff of the President's Council on Economic Advisors, and now directing the Center for Energy and Environment at Heritage, and also the Herbert and Joyce Morgan Fellow there. So Diana, please take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for inviting me. And I want to thank the National Interest for putting on this conference. It's such an important topic. Practically nothing is more important than energy and reliable energy prices and an abundance of energy. And I want to tell you that I'm here speaking to you from Cambridge, England, and it's very hot these days. England, the UK, is having a heat wave, but there's practically no air conditioning. The climate is changing, and there was no need to put in air conditioning when this house was built, which must have been about 75 years ago. And people still do not routinely have air conditioning in homes. So people do want it, and we are facing a future where we want more energy for many, many different things. Not just air conditioning here in my old house in Cambridge, England, but also for data centers, for AI. And I want to ask all of you whether you think net zero is possible. And then how many of you think that net zero will actually save the planet? Well, when President Trump came in, he did a 180-degree turn from what President Biden did in order to be able to produce more energy. And I really wish that the UK was following suit. President Biden cut off areas of the United States to oil exploration. He required electric vehicles. He had increased rules on power plants. When President Trump came in, he said that he wanted a different approach. He wanted to have energy dominance. And energy dominance means the United States producing as much energy as possible so that we can lower electricity prices, so that we don't have to depend on China for wind turbines, solar panels, and batteries for our electric vehicles. So he broadened the areas on which oil exploration is allowed. In the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, he ended the subsidies for wind and solar, so all forms of energy are on an equal playing field. He has proposed to get rid of the endangerment finding that says that CO2 is a pollutant that harms human health. And because of this, he is rolling back the emissions requirements for cars and the emissions requirements for power plants. So we can have more power plants so that people are able to choose their own vehicles without being limited to a certain share of vehicles sold being electric in 2032, which was President Biden's mandate. So it's very exciting seeing this fossil fuel development. And it's a big step away from the EU, and the UK, which are focused on net zero, which basically means degrowth, higher electricity prices, hollowing out manufacturing because energy intensive manufacturing is sent to China and India and other places in Asia, where the manufacturing is made with dirtier forms of electricity. And it's a big contrast, and it'll be interesting to see whether Europe follows the path set out by President Trump. And what's really interesting is that if America stopped using all fossil fuels, if the United States stopped using all fossil fuels today, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change models, this would only make a difference of 0.2 of 1 degree centigrade by the year 2100. If Europe stopped completely today, it would only make a difference of 1/10 of 1 degree centigrade by the year 2100, according to these IPCC models. And that's because energy demand and is growing elsewhere in the world. China is building 2 coal-fired power plants a day, for example. India is increasing its emissions, increasing its energy. And what we are doing is costing our economies trillions of dollars without any help for the climate. If we want to help the climate, what we should do is have more nuclear, more natural gas production, low emissions sources of dense energy, because we all need energy to progress. We can see that people are migrating from areas of the world with less fossil fuel use, Africa and Latin America, to areas with more fossil fuel use, such as Europe and the United States. People want jobs. People want Western standards of living, and they can't achieve it with solar and wind alone. We have 3 billion people in the world without electricity and running water. The only way they're going to be able to get to our standards of living is by having fossil fuel or nuclear energy. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker. And again, Paul, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Diana. Thank you very much. So we will turn next to Kendra Hughes. Kendra is Associate Director of Clean Energy and Conservation at American Progress. Has also done some work for Clean Air Task Force, including I think outreach up on Capitol Hill, working with members of Congress and staff to try to educate them on energy, environment, environmental justice related issues. Kendra, thank you to you for being with us today. I imagine you may have a slightly different view from Diana's, and we welcome hearing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. And yes, I have a little bit of a different perspective, given my background and my current role on clean energy and conservation. So to me, energy dominance should have, a few main goals. Reaching our energy or expanding our energy supply so that we're reaching growing demand in a way that doesn't raise electricity prices, that lowers emission, and that really sets the US as a leader in this changing energy landscape. And to do this, the US has to use all of our best available resources, and that includes solar, wind, storage, and other clean energy sources. I think if the US is serious about reaching energy dominance, although that term is another conversation for another day for me, we should be basing our decision on facts and not politics. And the facts are that solar and wind are 2 of the fastest growing energy sources in the country, and it takes much less time for them to become operational than fossil fuels. Solar and wind continue to become more affordable and cost competitive. Already, they're more cost competitive than coal, and other fossil fuel costs continue to increase. And while it is true that the sun isn't always shining and the wind isn't always blowing, energy storage does exist to address that, and it's a part of expanding clean energy to create a reliable grid that we need to make sure we're investing in. If we're serious about combating climate change and addressing extreme weather and reducing pollutions, then we can't afford to not expand our clean energy capacity, and we do need to be thoughtful and have a just transition away from a huge dependence on fossil fuels. And also, just a quick aside, that fossil fuels have been subsidized in the US for years. What the Biden administration did try to do was even some of that playing field and now they're going in the exact opposite direction. And also, fossil fuels already have plenty of land that they can use to drill and explore oil, but they choose not to because that would mess up their profit margins. So unfortunately, even though energy dominance is one of this administration's favorite phrases, they are dedicated to ignoring many of these facts and doing the exact opposite of what I believe dominance would entail. I feel like they've decided to live in the past and invest exclusively in fossil fuels, which again are already more expensive, or like coal, which is already more expensive than a lot of our clean energy alternatives and lead to high levels of pollution. Relying on fossil fuels also makes us more vulnerable to other countries since oil and gas prices are set on the global market. Plus, while we focus on trying to dominate with this energy of the past, the rest of the world is moving forward and building out their clean energy supply. So eventually, when we need to do that transition, we're going to end up relying on them even more than we might have now. And not only is this administration putting all of their eggs in their oil and gas basket, but they have completely abandoned their all of the above approach that they once had, and the pretense that they care about meeting rising energy demand or having the market decide the energy mix. They're doing everything in their power, legal or not, to prevent new wind and solar from getting built on or around federal lands. They're creating new obstacles for the renewables industry to jump through every week, making it impossible for investors or developers to plan for the future and work to ensure our country has a strong power grid that's going to meet the demand that's continuing to rise. The rules for clean energy are changing every day, and it's going to make it impossible for us to build out our clean energy grid that we really need to succeed in the future. The United States can't drill its way to energy independence, no matter how hard we try or how many promises we've made to fossil fuel donors. And all of these actions will do is lead to less energy, uncertain markets, more pollution, and higher electricity bills. If we're truly worried about energy dominance, we need to stop limiting our options and start investing in our future. We need to stop treating solar and wind like the boogeyman and stop making decisions based on who likes what a wind farm looks like. We need to get serious about creating a power grid that's supported by clean energy by investing in research and development, expanding our manufacturing, and upgrading our power grid with new technology and expanding our transmission capacity. And all this needs to be done in a way that works with communities that are going to be most impacted by a transition away from fossil fuels and that doesn't ignore the impacts of expanding infrastructure to lands or biodiversity. So thanks again for having me, and I'm excited for this discussion.
We have a great contrast, I think, already. So we will, and that'll give us a lot to explore when we start getting questions from the audience. Now we'll turn to Professor Brian Murray, who has really a very distinguished academic background, director of the Nicholas Institute for Energy, Environment, and Sustainability at Duke University, a research professor at the Nicholas School of Environment there, and also the Sanford School of Public Policy. And I understand also one of the lead authors on a portion of one of the IPCC, sorry, reports, the IPCC coming up earlier. Professor Murray, you worked on land use, I understand, which is an area where I've done a little work in the past myself, and certainly an interesting topic. So thank you very much for being with us today. Please proceed.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks to the Center for National Interest, both for convening the symposium that we all contributed to, and for the other panelists for their thought-provoking articles and for the conversations we've had thus far. I had a chance to read the other articles and was really inspired to put some thought into this. One thing I will say before I start is a little bit more about the Nicholas Institute. Yes, we are at Duke University. We're a very integral part of the university, but we're very outward facing. So we spend a lot of time engaging directly with decision makers in the public and private sector, trying to have impact now by bringing the university's expertise to these issues, and also to bring those experiences back to Duke students and Duke faculty to amplify their impact. So anyway, I'm going to open up with an effort to kind of reframe the dominance framing, I think. And first by saying, the dominance as it's been defined by the current administration is really focused on output. It's focused on production of oil and gas. But we're there. We're already the largest producers in the world of both oil and gas. Depending on how you measure the liquid petroleum, we're substantially larger than Saudi Arabia in oil and Russia in gas. So an effort to say our policy is going to dominate just in those domains really is doubling down on the status quo. And I think short changes like a forward-looking, a future-oriented looking approach to the energy issue. So I'd like to reframe it as building a future-ready system, an energy system that is basically well-suited to the economy that we're headed into. That's one that's based on innovation, as well as economic security and resilience. Like Diana was talking about, things could be a lot more resilient right now in the UK, where she is, in part because it hasn't been built, the grid has not been built for the environment in which we're operating right now. So I think we should focus on reliability, adaptability, and sustaining innovation into the future. And I prefer to use the term excellence to dominance, because dominance sort of suggests there's only kind of one winner, but I think our focus should be on having the most excellent energy system that we have. And to me, excellence is aligned with having the energy system that helps build our prosperous economy. So I'd say a core message of my article is that the focus should be not as much on fuels, but on conversion. And electricity should be the strategic center of our focus on excellence or dominance. Electricity is clearly the backbone of the 21st century economy. It was in the 20th century, certainly the latter parts of the 20th century as well, when we were scaling up. But if you look at AI, advanced manufacturing, the profusion of data centers, some feeding AI, some feeding other information needs, and increasing amount going into transportation and homes, we depend critically on it. I think if you think about that, then I think having a resilient grid is more important than picking particular fuel types that we need to expand in order to keep the economy running. We have to have much more of an all of the above approach. And I realize that means all of the above. It doesn't just mean it, if I'm saying that we shouldn't just be focusing on fossil fuels, I'm not arguing that we shouldn't have fossil fuels in the economy. It would just be a good way to figure out how to do that without increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and there are technologies for this. So why this all matters in terms of US competitiveness, having a fragile system creates a strategic vulnerability. So I really agree with Diana's focus that energy is strategic imperative. And so we need to have a robust system. So if you imagine what would happen if the US grid went down for a week, even as we remain the world's largest producers of oil and gas, if our grid goes down for a week, our economy just grinds to a halt across all sectors of the economy. And we face threats, whether it's geopolitical, weather and climate, cyber risks, pandemic, all of these things really kind of are threats to the system that we need to be resilient against. So I think the solutions in any excellence strategy needs to be investing in grid modernization and storage and clean generation. And renewables is really not just about climate, but importantly, it is about climate because of the emissions factor. But as Kendra pointed out, it's also at this point fastest to market in the US because of the backlog in natural gas turbines. That will work its way out for sure. But we're talking about growth rates driven by AI and data centers in the next 5 years that have to be met by putting as much out there as we can. So if I want to position it in terms of the other articles that were contributed by my colleagues here, with Luke, who we're going to hear from in a minute, focuses a lot on innovation. I'd say innovation needs reliable infrastructure. With Kendra, clean energy is a strategic necessity. I agree with that. And again, with Diana, energy is strategic imperative. But I think the battlefield is more on the grid than it is on the well and on the tanker. Talked about U.S. independence. That's been featured prominently in the president and the White House's declarations on energy emergency of being independent. But we're not independent, even as the world's largest oil producers. We're still price takers in world oil markets. 2022 showed us that in with ample evidence. As we saw, we were the world's largest producers then, and then because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we saw world oil prices go up, affecting all consumers throughout the world, including those in the United States. So we operate in a global market. Grid investments are also more localized, and so it sort of changes the geographic nature of what investment incentives are. We think about that. So I think I'll wrap with that now. I've got I think we're going to have like a minute later on to have some closing comments. So I'll hold any further comments for that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's turn now to our final speaker here, Luke Bolar. Luke is the Chief External Affairs Officer at ClearPath. Before joining ClearPath, was a Senior Vice President at Edelman in the energy and environmental practice there, and spent many years previously on Capitol Hill in a number of key positions, Chief of Staff to a senator, working on Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, and doing all kinds of other cool things on Capitol Hill. So, Luke, we have here today kind of actually, in addition to having varied perspectives substantively, we also have perspectives from you having been on Capitol Hill, from Diana having been in the administration, from Brian in the academic community, and from Kendra kind of in the activism and outreach world, sort of working with Congress. So, but Luke, please you're last. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, thanks, Paul, and thanks to the Center for National Interest and the co-panelists. All really, really excellent points so far. I'll start with just explaining ClearPath and sort of where we are in this whole ecosystem. We're a conservative energy advocacy organization that focuses on innovation and scaling up American innovation that helps reduce global emissions. We've been around for about 11 years, and we've actually always embraced some version of an American energy dominance agenda. We also work to try to untangle some of what we describe as false choices that I think have plagued some of the energy policy debates over the last several decades. Fossil versus renewable, or low emission technologies. We need both. We can have both. Economic prosperity versus environmental sustainability. We can have both. We think both are important. And so when we think about the energy dominance agenda, I like to simplify it into sort of three key themes. The first being accelerating American innovation. The second, letting America build new energy projects. And the third, how do we sell American energy globally to counter China and other economic competitors? And so talking about innovation, we think whoever has the best new technologies will win. And if we're talking about dominance, we're not competing against ourselves here. So we need those next generation technologies to be built in America. If we don't build them, somebody else is going to. So that's a lot of different new technologies: next generation nuclear, enhanced geothermal, carbon capture, long duration grid scale storage. All of those are emerging technologies that are very important to the full big picture of what we're talking about here. So the second theme, letting America build. Permitting reform is sort of what everybody in Washington, D.C. says these days. Regulatory reform, permitting reform. We've been talking about that for decades, dating back to when I was on Capitol Hill and working on the Environment and Public Works Committee. I think what's different now is the demand growth that we're seeing. And so if you think about 2005 to roughly a few years ago, growth was fairly stagnant. A lot of the publicly traded utilities weren't planning to do major increases. That's completely changed in the last year and will completely change going forward. We think and predict, probably a conservative estimate, 30 to 40% demand growth by 2040. So if you put that in perspective, that's roughly 3 Texas-sized grids over the next 15 years that we may need to put into our energy system. That's a lot of new energy. We support natural gas, think natural gas is great, and some may say, well, let's just meet that demand growth with natural gas. If you think about, and I think Brian mentioned this, the natural gas turbines, we have enough natural gas. It's some of the equipment in the infrastructure that we may not have enough of today. GE Vernova is an excellent American company. They're probably doubling their output. That alone could meet maybe a third of that demand growth. So you really need to think about all different types of energy technologies to be able to meet that growth. Which brings me to the third point and theme is how do we sell American technology, American energy globally to compete with what China is doing globally, which is extending their reach rapidly. They're building and manufacturing a lot domestically, but they're also expanding a lot globally. We don't think it's realistic, and it's not realistic to match what China is subsidizing globally, or even necessarily compete. But there are things that we can do to be a little more strategic with tools that the U.S. has, including the Development Finance Corporation, the Export-Import Bank, other ways that we can make American technologies more appealing to global trading partners so that they're choosing American technology. And in a lot of cases, in most cases, that technology is going to be lower emissions. We have higher standards. We produce things in a much cleaner way than most of the rest of the world does. And so if you're buying an American energy or American product, it's naturally going to be lower emission than something from, say, China. I think some of the previous panelists and Diana mentioned China, who has been building a lot of new coal. Just last year, they began construction on 94 gigawatts of new coal, which is about a third of U.S. coal fleet. So just in 1 year alone, they're building a third of the U.S. coal fleet in China alone. That's exponentially bigger when you start to look at the developing world and who they're partnering with to expand their reach. We're close to finalizing a report on what that means globally. They don't produce a lot of data to say where they're investing. So we looked at Brazil as a case study, large economy, significant U.S. trading partner, and rough numbers, we'll have these out soon, but rough numbers, about 10% of the energy infrastructure in Brazil is going to be owned by China. And so if you look at other countries in Southeast Asia and around the world, that number is a lot higher. But a country like Brazil, it's probably going to be close to 10% of their energy infrastructure. So when you think about energy dominance, American energy dominance, it's new technology that we need to make here. It's allowing those new technologies to get to market, to be able to scale and commercialize. And then how do we use federal policy to make our technologies more appealing to the developing world?
Thank you very much, Luke, and thank you again to each of you, both for your articles and for your remarks here this morning. So let's open it up for questions from our audience. Again, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab. I'm generally speaking going to direct the questions really just to one or two people so that we can keep moving. But if any of you are sort of especially eager, to add on a topic, and I haven't called on you to do so, please kind of flag me, and we can make sure that everyone has an opportunity to comment. We have one question that's come in from Rich Koslerich, a former U.S. diplomat who's now at the Schar School at George Mason. Rich is asking kind of about the the tension, between low domestic energy prices and maximizing exports. And maybe Diana, I'll just toss that one to you, actually. Uh,
Well, that's a great question, because low domestic energy prices are what we need. And we can see, looking at all 50 states, looking at residential electricity prices for each state, that the 10 most expensive states in terms of residential electricity all require renewables, with one exception. And I'll give a bonus to anyone who can guess that. The lowest states in terms of electricity prices do not require wind and solar, with one exception. And I'll give a bonus to anyone who knows that. So we can see not just within the United States, where we have this wonderful system where states can all pick their types of energy that they want, but globally also, that more wind and solar lead to higher electricity prices. And it's really counterintuitive. I mean, if I were to say to you, Paul, I'm going to give you a beautiful Mercedes. I'm going to give it to you. It's free, but you can only use it during the day. And you might say, but Diana, I drive at night too. And I say, too bad, you need another car for night. And you say, but that means 2 sets of oil changes, 2 gasoline fill-ups, 2 sets of insurance payments. I say, too bad, that's the way it is. And it's like that with wind and solar. The wind blows for free, the sun shines for free, but they don't blow all the time. So we need a parallel system. And Kendra mentioned energy storage, that energy storage solves this, but energy storage adds a cost. We also have natural gas peaker plants. That's a backup also. They click on when the wind stops blowing. Those are more expensive. It's less expensive to have a natural gas power plant run continuously than a peaker plant go on and off when the wind stops blowing, because that's 2 different systems that we're paying for. Just like you, Paul, if I gave you a free Mercedes during the day, and you could only, you would have to have another car for night. But what's really important with these low prices is, as the other speaker said, having a resilient, reliable electricity grid. And you can just look at the NERC report, December 2024. NERC is North American Electricity Reliability Council, and it warns of blackouts in the middle part of the country, in the MISO states from Louisiana up to Michigan, and in PJM, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland system, because of excessive buildup of renewables and not enough backups. And that was the problem with Spain. In May, the entire Iberian Peninsula went down for a day, because 2 solar arrays in the southwest of the country went down, and there was not enough backup. Solar and wind are more expensive to make electricity out of. And we have spent over the past 20 years, we've spent about $9 trillion in subsidies globally for wind and solar. Everyone says it's cheaper, but now that these are being ended in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, people say, oh, we need these subsidies. And for all of you, for some of you, all of the above doesn't mean all of the above without subsidies. For me, all of the above means, yes, all of the above without subsidies. But for you, some of my fellow panelists, all of the above means subsidies for wind and solar. And there was about $1 trillion worth of subsidies for clean energy in the Inflation Reduction Act. There was nothing like that for fossil fuels. And I think it's very important that we just call things as they are, that all of the above to some people means continued big subsidies. People say wind and solar are cheaper, we should be using them. But what they're saying is we really have to subsidize them. And I don't see why we keep saying the subsidies are just for a little while, just till the transition ends. But they seem to keep going, and there are big complaints. We're talking about growth rates of AI and data centers, how we need inexpensive energy. These data centers are reopening nuclear power plants and building their own natural gas power plants. They're not putting in renewables. They're not putting in solar arrays and wind plants next to them. I mean, 3 Mile Island is opening for Microsoft, and they've asked Constellation Energy. Microsoft has asked Constellation Energy to reopen 3 Mile Island. They're not putting in solar and wind power. So I agree that we need a resilient grid, a reliable grid, and for that we need fossil fuels. Because you look at the interconnection queue, there's all these solar and wind that was going on, waiting to go on because of the subsidies. But since natural gas, coal, nuclear didn't get the same subsidies, the backups were not going on the grid. And that was the point of the North American Energy Reliability Council report and why they were warning of the blackouts right here in the United States this summer.
Thank you, Diana. So we have a couple of more questions, and I think Diana, you may have provoked some of our audience members to ask some additional questions. So these are
Am I
both.
allowed to jump in
Oh,
with
Kendra,
quick
if you'd like to
clarifying
respond,
things?
please go
Yeah,
ahead, and then
just
we can move on. Go ahead. Sure.
flagging that the Spain example was debunked and it was because of the grid, not because of solar. And fossil fuels have been subsidized for literally, I don't know, longer than I've been alive, like for decades. And so I don't even know what that number is off the hand, but it's very high. So again, the
It's
subsidy.
higher than what was the subsidies for wind and solar in the Inflation Reduction Act? No.
If you're thinking about direct, indirect subsidies, cost to health, cost to pollution, yes, much higher. And now those subsidies from IRA are gone, and people can't invest in renewables, not because of the subsidies being gone, but because of all the bans and the blockades of the administration. So we don't even have a chance to see what the investments did for the industry because these executive orders that are our new way of law are preventing us from being able to build more. So just wanted to clarify a few things there. Also, how many power outages have we had because of fossil fuels and because of extreme weathers? Many. And so just wanted to.
All right. Well, we can move on to the next questions, and we've got about I want to keep 5 minutes at the end so each of you can have a closing comment. So we've got 17 minutes, and let's try to have kind of relatively brief answers so we can move on. We have a couple of questions here in the queue. One first to Diana. Actually, on, does Heritage and does the Trump administration recognize the well-documented health impacts of pollution from automobile emissions? And let's have kind of a brief response to that. And then Matt Parker is asking our conservative panelists, so I think that means Diana and also you, Luke. Why focus so much on fossil fuels when the rest of the world is investing in renewables? If America wants to be dominant, shouldn't it be important to lead in technology that the rest of the world is taking seriously? So maybe Diana, you first on automobile emissions, which are a little off topic for our session here today, but perhaps just very briefly on that point. And then
Sure.
we have
Well,
this broader question about investment.
Sure. Well, it's a great question, and I think it's very appropriate because we want to have inexpensive energy for transportation and for creating electricity. And the Environmental Protection Agency has just put out a proposal to repeal the endangerment finding, the 2009 endangerment finding based on 2007 data, that CO2 is a pollutant that significantly harms human health. And if this proposal is out for public comment now, they had a similar proposal for power plants, again, to repeal some of those emissions requirements on the grounds that CO2 and other greenhouse gases did not harm human health. And the rationale for this is that Vice President Al Gore back in 2000 said right now Manhattan would be underwater, that we have more hurricanes, more tornadoes. New data, updated data, shows that we don't have more hurricanes, more wildfires from greenhouse gas emissions. We've had a hot summer, but it has not been hotter than the 1930s. We have more damage from hurricanes, but that's because instead of building a $100,000 house on the coast of Florida, people build a $1 million house on the coast of Florida. So the same hurricane comes along and doesn't do $100,000 of damage, it does $1 million of damage, but that doesn't mean that the hurricane is stronger. Pollutants from cars are also particulate matter, and EPA has not tackled that. And particulate matter is the soot that comes out that's been taken out, for example, with the unleaded gasoline. There is no suggestion right now out there of changing some of these standards for automobiles, but there is a proposal to roll back the endangerment finding for greenhouse gases like CO2, methane, water vapor, because it's not clear now that they are linked to any negative consequences. And we breathe out CO2, we drink it in our sodas. So I'll turn it over to Luke for the other question.
Yeah, Luke, why focus so much on fossil fuels when the rest of the world is investing in renewables? That was the question.
I think it depends on what you're looking at. I think globally, coal demand is still increasing, and I think fossil demand is still increasing. And so, yes, a lot of the rest of the world is investing in renewables. They're also still using fossil. And if you think of it from the developing world perspective, you got to think of like gigawatt scale energy demand. And so some of these countries are far less developed than the United States. Their economies are far weaker than ours. They need to build what's the quickest and most affordable for their countries. Places like India, and I think it was mentioned earlier, there's billions of people around the world that have no electricity. And so if your governments in these countries are trying to build power to provide that electricity for basic human needs, they're finding what is the most affordable for them. And that's part of the challenge, is that they're turning to places like China, who can come and subsidize a new unmitigated coal plant in their country. And so true, people are investing in renewables, but they're also still using fossil and investing in fossil as well. Another good example, Indonesia, probably one of the fastest growing populations. It's rainforests. They would love, I mean, they'll tell you they would love to build a bunch of new wind in Indonesia, but they're not gonna clear out a bunch of their rainforests for the amount of land there. They also have a lot of coal reserves that they can access there, and so a place like Indonesia is turning to coal. And so, you know, when we think about it, is what are some of the technologies that can work globally? And so naturally we fall on nuclear a lot. Nuclear works really well. It can provide that gigawatt scale capacity that these countries will need. It's also low emission, and we're hopefully still today, I would say still today, but maybe hopefully still in the near future, ahead of other countries in terms of the innovation. So,
yeah, and another
Thank
reason
you.
for that, for the focus on investment in fossil fuels, is because in Europe, the UK, the United States under President Biden, it's fossil fuel development that was banned. It was the coal-fired power plants that President Biden wanted to zero out. It's your natural gas stove he didn't want you to have, your natural gas water heater. He wasn't trying to take away your electric stove, your electric water heater, your electric heating. He was trying to take away the natural gas and coal-fired power plants. He was trying to get rid of your gasoline-powered car. About 70% of the cars sold in 2032 by auto companies would have had to be plug-in hybrid or battery-powered electric. There was the war on fossil fuels, which is why now when we talk about energy dominance and getting that back, now we are talking about fossil fuels.
But
If I could chime in.
Let's give Brian perhaps a chance, Kendra, and then I'll come back to you in just a second. And let's close out on this point after the two of you speak, and then I have a question for all of you, and we'll see how much time we have left. But Brian, please.
Well, we'll have to have another conversation. All right, we'll have another conversation at another time about what takeaway rights means in this particular case. But I wanted to point to something I read in, I think it was Financial Times yesterday, about 700 leading hedge funds with 700 billion in assets under management are now starting to short oil, and they're starting to reverse their shorts on solar, for instance. So why are they shorting oil? Because what they're seeing, actually, we could talk about what China's building in terms of its power generation, which is a third of the world's renewable. But what the effect that they're having on the electric vehicle market is pretty profound, not just for the Chinese market, but for the European market and starting to get into the US market. The effect that that seems to be having on future expectations of oil prices is pretty dramatic, and pretty dramatic in terms of not expecting to see $100 plus oil barrel, price per barrel oil out there because of what they would expect to be a significant shift in the demand side of the market. So I think we should take a look at that. And I think another thing too, I think it's great that Microsoft is working with 3 Mile Island to feed its data centers in Pennsylvania with zero carbon electricity. But it's not correct to say that the hyperscalers like Microsoft are not investing in renewables like solar. It's just absolutely not the case. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Okay, Kendra, just very briefly, because I want to kind of move on from the renewable versus fossil debate to some other topics.
There's so many things to say. I was just going to flag that we were producing more oil under Biden than ever before than any other country. So I don't know how we can say he was banning fossil fuels because that just never happened. So just wanted to flag.
All right.
He
So
was banning because he expanded the national monument, saying that federal leasing in these areas was not allowed. He did not allow offshore. He did not allow offshore drilling. And yes, oil production did hit a peak under Biden. But the question is, how much more would it have been if he had allowed more oil production? And the whole point of energy dominance is to allow as much as possible so that we have big elasticity of supply. That means we can respond faster. We dominate the price. That's what President Trump is doing. You can't say that.
But these companies already own a bunch of leases that they're just not using. Yeah, they already own it. Like right. they don't need more.
I think this is a debate that we can't finish in an hour. Let's finish off on fossil for now. I wanted to turn actually, if we can, for a minute here. I don't see another question in the queue from the audience, so I encourage all of you to ask any more questions that you have. But let's turn for a minute to nuclear. Luke has brought up nuclear a couple of times already, and I know that ClearPath is kind of very firmly behind nuclear energy. Is nuclear something that everyone agrees on? Maybe Brian, Kendra, Diana, perhaps Brian, you first.
Yeah. I'm rooting for nuclear. I think it would be great. It's clean, it's firm. However, there's some challenges with it, right? I mean, I shouldn't speak for all of us. A lot of people would like to see small modular reactors work because the potential for there to be scale economies bringing the cost down are considerable, and there should be improvements in the safety record of those. However, no one's willing to take that first bite, and it's a loss leader proposition. Whoever's going to do it is going to lose money. I know Tennessee Valley Authority and others have been talking about putting this out there. There was an authority out in Utah that was supposed to be doing it last year, and they had to pull the plug because of cost. In terms of conventional nuclear reactors, our recent experience with that has not been great. 4 new units being built, 2 in South Carolina, 2 in Georgia. Both of them were stopped for a while because they were way over budget. The Georgia one continued and ended up being built at triple the original budget. It's on the books. The ratepayers are paying for it. The problem with nuclear is not necessarily that it can't be made safe. It can be made safe. I think the record is really clear about that. The problem with it is it's not inexpensive to make it safe. And sure, there are going to be regulatory reforms. I think they can bring that cost down, but there's some fundamentals that I think need to be tackled with. But I will repeat what I said earlier. I'm rooting for it. I just hope that it can overcome the economics.
Diana,
yes,
you're rooting for it too. Okay.
We're rooting for it too, but we're not rooting for subsidies for nuclear. We want regulatory reform, and President Trump has taken the lead with 3 executive orders regarding nuclear. One changing the level of harmful radiation, another giving the states more flexibility with performance standards, another looking for a solution to the problem of waste disposal. We think there should be extensive regulatory reform to lower the cost. We used to be able to build a nuclear power plant in 4 years. Now it takes about 10 years. And we should let the states move on their own, setting basic performance standards. And nuclear does not need more subsidies. It needs regulatory reform.
Thank you, Diana. Kendra, nuclear, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Brian said. I think it is a good source of clean, firm power, and we just need to make sure we're doing it safely and with working with the communities who are in and around those facilities.
Terrific, terrific. Well, I'm glad we found one where everyone is a little closer together. Not identical, but somewhat closer together. Well, we're getting toward the end here. I don't see another question from the audience. So why don't we just give you each a minute here to respond, and let's or to give a final thought, and let's just go in the same order that we started with, Diana, Kendra, Brian, and then Luke wrapping us up. So Diana, please.
I think fossil fuels are clearly the way to energy dominance. We can see in the national arena, the residential electricity price in California is 32 cents per kilowatt hour. It's 1/3 of that in Utah and Louisiana, where they don't require renewables. And the way to move forward with our energy dominance agenda is to level the playing field, get rid of the subsidies, let states do what they want. We've heard a lot about empowering communities. There's about 1,000 communities that have tried to reject solar and wind because they think that there's better use for the land than solar and wind. And we also want to make sure that we're independent of China. China builds 70% of wind turbines, about 70% of solar panels, and about 70% of batteries. And we don't want China to have that power over us. So our energy dominance agenda is using what we have, allowing people to use it if that's what they want to do, allowing companies to invest in it, and not requiring that people use a technology that is more expensive and that results in our dependence on China. And when I said take away your right to a natural gas stove, there were Department of Energy regulations that would have made it unprofitable or unaffordable for companies to sell natural gas stoves. Same with these electric vehicles. Auto manufacturers would not have been allowed to sell more than a small share of gasoline-powered cars, even if people wanted to buy them. And we should just level the playing field, let people buy what they want, drive what they want. And if a community chooses solar and wind without the subsidy, I mean, that's fine. We just shouldn't be subsidizing.
Diana, thank you. Kendra.
You know, I think we should definitely level the playing field. I think we should, maybe think about getting rid of some of the subsidies for fossil fuels that they've had for years and stop banning new permits for wind and solar. I think we should let people utilize what they want, let investors invest in the energy they think is the energy of the future. And if that is solar and wind, then that's great. I think we should really work on transitioning into the power grid of the future. And with demand rising, we need to get energy fast. We need it to be affordable, and that means we need more of it. And so we shouldn't be banning a whole source, again, just because of some facts that may or may not be true. And yeah, I think we should focus on working with communities to transition them away from fossil fuels. Right now, it's hard for them because fossil fuels make up most of their revenues. These companies come in and take advantage of the communities and don't let them have a diverse revenue stream. So we really need to work there. And then maybe that will lead to some of that opposition going away. And I think we just really need to be smart and think about where the world is headed and what we want to see in our future for future generations. And if that's the case, then clean needs to be a big part of the mix.
Thank you, Kendra. Brian.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for this provocative panel. I'd just say I think I'll end with a call to build the energy backbone of our future economy. And I think we need to lead by building smart, secure, resilient systems from a diverse set of sources. I think we want to power the economy we've become rather than the one that we've been. I started learning how to drive back in the Arab oil embargo days. It's not 1975 now. We need to be looking not 50 years in the past, we need to be looking 50 years ahead. And I think, and I'll call it in his breakup letter with the president, Elon Musk made this point as he walked away from the administration on the Big Beautiful Bill, that they should be investing at least as much in the future technologies as in the past. We're in actually what's called the intelligence age. There's a great essay by Sam Altman from OpenAI where he talks about the miracle of melted sand and how that's changed everything. That's going to turn our economy upside down on its head. And so I think we're actually all in agreement that a resilient grid necessarily to power that economy is really critical. I think whether, what you subsidize and what you don't is a point of perpetual disagreement, perhaps by others on the panel. I will say that whether you're, subsidizing per unit power, I think there's always a role for DOE and other federal research sources to be continuing to do research on innovation, on energy innovation, to come up with the future technologies. It came up with fracking many years ago, and it's come up with plenty of other alternatives to fracking since then. I think we need to continue to invest in that. And also in terms of the role of China, that's a strategic imperative that we have to face. We have a risk of losing the technology and innovation edge as they permeate the markets with renewables and electric vehicles. If the rest of the world's doing that, we'd be foolish to miss out on that. So in conclusion, that's kind of the energy excellence that our economy actually needs, and I look forward to working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Luke, last word for you.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. And I'll just come back to innovation. We have an amazing free market economy. We have world-class universities, including Duke. We have world-class national labs that are doing that R&D to come up with those next generation technologies. And then we need to let them build. We need a federal regulatory environment where new energy systems, existing energy systems, can build quicker, build in less time than it takes to get a college degree, which is the case today. And then working on some federal policies that help right-size our export finance opportunities so that those U.S. American technologies can sell globally and compete globally.
Thank you for bringing up the export piece, Luke, a couple of times. I wish we had a little more time to talk about our allies and exports and how that all fits in. Way too much to fit into a single hour. But we're all of us at the Center for the National Interest and the National Interest, we're so grateful to the four of you and to the other symposium authors for contributing your perspectives. Thanks for taking part in the conversation today. I think we had a really robust exchange of views that I think kind of very well reflects sort of the complexity of these issues, the varied perspectives on these issues, and also actually how important they are. So thank you so much to all of you, and we hope to have more contributions from you all in the future. So thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for listening in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.